Here to discuss the big picture, please welcome Martellus Bennett, Natasha Cloud, and Hudson Taylor. And once again, Jemele Hill.
That's right, I'm back. So this panel is designed to talk about, obviously, the subject matter, but kind of what the mood and what happens and what makes athletes individually decide to take on issues that they're passionate about and issues they feel like will make society better. Natasha, I want to start with you. You were a part of the WNBA blackout in response to Black Lives Matter. Tell us just how that came about and what made you decide to participate.
Yeah, collectively as the WNBA, we were trying to figure out what was the best approach to approach those situations. Some teams had protested with shirts. Some teams had already done some media blackouts. But for the Mystics, we were trying to decide what was the best way that we wanted to handle things, knowing that it was still a touchy topic. We knew what we wanted to get across, but how do we do so in a conducive and constructive way? So for us, it was to do a media blackout. So media blackout, for those of you that don't know, after the game we're required 40 minutes of media where they can ask us whatever questions. And we made it so that we were not answering any questions about the game. We would answer, we would have one spokesperson who at the time was Kia Vaughn for us to speak on what was happening within our society and within our country at the time. So for us, that was our best approach, to be united, to have a united front. We wore all plain black shirts, no WNBA logos, and really just wanted to come across as a united front, of all walks of life, white, black, straight, gay, it doesn't matter. We're all united in this fight that's going on right now in our country.
You also, in the last few days, in recent days, you and also some of your teammates spoke out against the abortion ban. What made you decide to lend your voice to that particular issue?
In all aspects, my mindset is, for me as an athlete, I've been blessed with a platform, and I feel that I would be doing a disservice to a lot of people that look like me out in this world that are suffering from inequalities or injustices if I don't speak up. I feel like that's part of the problem. So with our platform here, with Monumental and the Mystics, I chose to speak on the abortion law and how asinine I do think those laws are. Right now, we've decided, right now in this country, we have decided that we can allow for a majority of white men to sit down in a room and decide what is the best decisions for a woman's body and for women's health moving forward. What's even more frustrating is that we have women sitting in those rooms making those decisions as well. So for us in the WNBA, us on the Mystics, we want to have our voices heard that we're not a piece of property that needs laws and regulations. We are our own individuals. And I like to say I'm pro mind your business, because at the end of the day...
Same. Team mind your business.
I'm pro mind your business, because at the end of the day, no one has the right to tell me what I can and cannot do with my body, that I don't have the rights to my body, that I can't make decisions for my best interest of my health, for the best interest of my life. And when you're talking about criminalizing women for making decisions that best interest their life, their health, and their well-being, that's asinine to me.
Mm-hmm. We can all go home now. That was great.
Martellus, you were playing during the height of the Colin Kaepernick protest. On your own team, in the locker room, just what kind of conversations did that protest create?
Well, each team I've been on is a different conversation depending on the location and where those guys come from. I think the biggest thing that was missing through it all was empathy. There wasn't a lot of empathetic approaches to what was actually being going, what the conversation was actually about. Everyone was so firm and so thinking someone wanted their sympathy. No one wanted your sympathy. We wanted you to be able to empathize with what was going on in the world. And a lot of conversations were all over the place. There was no true direction of where the conversation should go or where it should be taken. And that was like one of the major issues with the entire protest. It wasn't aligned in the information that was being received and the way the information was being delivered. It was a bunch of individuals attacking a major problem that included every single person in the room.
Now, how did you choose to respond?
I did all kinds of stuff. I was one of the guys. I sat during the national anthem. Most of the times I did a lot of political cartoons that spoke on the issues. And as a creator, as a writer, or as a maker, I try to make things that the best way that I could talk most of the time is by making stuff. So I usually make stuff that reflects the way I feel. And I think when I make art, people have to approach the art and get the information and make decisions for themselves so I could provoke thought with the things that I say. Because when you speak to a lot of people, they get defensive about the conversation or they don't want to have the conversation. And the thing is, I try to get my white teammates to understand that they are a part of this as well. Like, if we don't have you as allies, we cannot make the impact that we want to make in the world. And for us as black folks, we've been through so much that we could empathize with everyone. It's like, yeah, I feel you on that, dog. That's messed up. Oh, they did what? Oh, yeah, I know, man. That happened to my cousin when he bought a Cadillac, you know? So it's just like, we could empathize with everyone, but I felt like not everyone could empathize with us.
Now, Hudson, a few football players, they also spoke out when the fight for same-sex marriage was going on. What is it about football? Maybe it's its popularity. You are better situated to answer this question than me, but what is it about football that when you see a Colin Kaepernick protest or players speaking about same-sex marriage, it registers differently in the public?
Yeah, so I think we've heard it from a lot of different panelists. I mean, athletes have a tremendous amount of cultural capital, right? We live in a sport-obsessed country, a sport-obsessed world. You go to any high school or middle school, the hallways are lined with sports trophies. The back of every newspaper is the sports section. And so when an athlete speaks, people listen. And I think when you look at the amount of coverage and visibility that certain sports get, that microphone is bigger and larger in certain sports than it is in others. I think also when we look at LGBTQ issues, sometimes that person who you think is the least likely to be an ally, when they actually then show up and say something that's in support of equality and justice, that also I think can open people's eyes and get them to listen in a really unique way. And so I think still in 2019, there's this assumption that sport is not a welcoming space for the LGBTQ community. There's an assumption that football players are homophobic or that more male athletes are homophobic. And so I think whenever you have somebody who has that confidence to disprove that assumption, it connects with people in a really unique way. And again, we've heard from so many people today, like sport speaks to people across language barriers. I think it brings people together across political opinions. And so when you get that right messenger to deliver that right message, it has a huge impact.
Now, we're in a time now where I think it's fair to say this is the best time probably in history to be a professional athlete when you consider the financial power athletes have, the influence, social media, all the things they're doing there. Martellus, are athletes still scared to speak out on issues because they think they will risk losing endorsements or money or cultural capital?
Yeah, I don't have any endorsements, so they should. I was like one of the guys, they don't really know where you're going to go. So a lot of guys were. I had conversations with guys who wanted to join me, but they were like, but what would Nike or what would Adidas say or Coca-Cola or whoever it is that they represent, they didn't want to step out on that platform. But at the same time, you have a lot of guys, a lot of athletes have platforms, a lot of them are false activists. I think to be an activist, you have to be active and you have to be educated on what you're being active about. A lot of guys like to join the conversation because it looks cool, but not really part of the conversation. It's just like to put a little bit out there and be like, yeah, I'm on your team, but they're really not on your team. Mm-hmm. They just want to put that position out there so someone would say, oh yeah, I was a part of it, but they're not really a part of it. So a lot of guys are afraid to step out there and step up to the plate because you can risk a lot of things. But I think like she said, it is a disservice that when you get a platform, it's your purpose to be the voice of the voiceless. There's a lot of people from our community that cannot be heard, that shares our same perspective. So when we can share that perspective of our community into the world, we have to use that platform. And no platform is too big or too small, because if you're heard by 5 people, that's better than heard by no people at all. So I think think more athletes should step up. But like in the NFL with sorry, I feel like I'm talking forever. But in the NFL, like when we were protesting, there actually wasn't that many guys protesting.
No.
There was maybe two handfuls of guys at most throughout the entire league that was truly protesting. A lot of guys didn't jump into the conversation until Trump said something about being the bastards, the sons of bastards, or the sons
That
of.
wasn't quite the word he used, but we know.
Yeah, the sons of female dogs. There's kids here, so the sons of female dogs, but then the whole conversation they was protesting against Trump and the words that were spread. They wasn't protesting for what the actual conversation was about. So it was easier for guys to join in then because now you're attacking their manhood, not the community.
Now, we saw a situation recently where, with the Boston Red Sox, all the players of color chose not to go to the White House, to celebrate having won the World Series. All the white players did choose to go. Natasha, as somebody who's been a part of a team protest, how did you all prevent? Maybe everybody's not on the same page. How did you prevent this being a split, or that there would be some uncomfortable dynamics? Because maybe everybody in that locker room didn't want to follow through with the blackout.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you try to tread lightly because everyone might not be on the same page about it. But I think what we did that was well is we sat down as a team and we had these discussions. And I think that's the biggest part when you're talking about social advocacy. Jeez. Woo, thank you, I got it out, y'all. Is having that open dialogue and that open forum and having those tough conversations. And that's what we did as the Mystics. And again, we collectively figured out what was going to be in the best interest of everyone, not just individually who this was affecting in their everyday lives, but this may not affect the majority of our white players, but they support us. But let's find a way that you're comfortable supporting us. So even if that means we just stand solely and someone speaks for us and we stand behind them, then that is okay moving forward.
And a reminder that if you all have any questions, you can go to slido.com and ask your question, and it'll be addressed here on the panel. And we have one already. Hudson, I'll direct this one at you. Can you comment on the impact of LGBTQ athletes wanting to be advocates, but potentially not wanting to come out in the spotlight?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the challenges in sport is that I think whether you're an athlete in middle school or a professional athlete, there's this language that says stick to sports, shut up and dribble, don't be a distraction. And at the professional level, the average career of many professional athletes is 3 or 4 or 5 years, right? And so the risk doesn't outweigh the reward in a lot of different sports spaces. And so I think one of the challenges that we see and that we have in this space is, I see Colin Kaepernick not being on a team connected to the pressures that might keep an LGBTQ athlete in the closet, right? Unless and until we have a sports culture that welcomes and embraces athlete activism, there's still going to be a culture that says, don't be a distraction, don't talk about the things that you care about, don't share your identity with the world. Now, I've spent the last 8 years working on LGBTQ issues in sports, and I think it's so important for athletes to come out and share their story. But I also don't think it's important. I also don't think I have any right to ask an athlete to share their personal story with the world. For me, as somebody who's not LGBT, I put so much of the onus on those apathetic allies, those people who say that they're supportive but then do nothing to actually impact systems of oppression. And so I don't think that I need to be a person of color to care about racial justice. I don't think that I need to be a woman to care about gender equality. And in the same way, when we look at all these sports spaces, we need more allies to stand up and speak out and use their privilege to help dismantle some of these systems.
You said something important there, and that I want to follow up on before we get to the next question that was asked from the audience about how that culture of support has to be there. A lot of people feel as if that culture of support has to be there within the ownership structure or team structure or wherever it is or whoever it is you play for. I'm reminded of Brittany Griner, who talked about the fact that she was encouraged to not come out because she was at Baylor, which is a Christian university, and that came from, or she was pressured rather not to come out, and that came from Baylor itself. So what can ownership, coaches, what can they do to foster a better culture of support and not use that term distraction, which I think is lazy as hell when they say, speaking out against racial justice or on behalf of LGBTQ issues, that's somehow a distraction from the team. What can owners and coaches do, I'll ask all of you, to basically have a more supportive environment for their players?
I think number one, they need to realize that they don't own people.
Anyone else?
That's right. That was it. He did the mic drop there. Amen. Look at what Monumental did. Look what the Mystics did. We're sitting on stage because our company, our team, our organization believes in giving us a voice and giving us a platform to talk about hard discussions and discussions that need to happen. I mean, this is a prime example of what it means to be supported as a player. I can remember my rookie season, Coach Tebow coming into the locker room, and there was something going on within that day. It also fell on the game day, and I can remember exactly, he said, today's a big day for our game, but today's an even bigger game, or today's an even bigger day for you after our game. When the media comes in, talk about what's going on. Feel free to discuss it and bring light to it. And from that, to feel that as a player, opposed to the NFL where you fear repercussions from speaking out, you fear losing endorsements and sponsorships from speaking out and using your voice for the greater majority. I mean, to not have that fear with your organization and your company is everything.
I think that starts at a young age, though, because kids once you start playing pee-wee football, like that individualism is taken away, right? And they're raising athletes and not raising people, right? I think the coaches need to be raising people to be human beings, not just to be great athletes. And I think they miss out the point. They spend so much time teaching the kid how to run routes, to shoot a basketball, to do all these other things, but they don't teach them to become people, like whole people, right? And I think that's a super interesting conversation because I always felt like once you sign a waiver your kids sign a waiver to play sports, you sign over their identity. Right? Because they're shaped by the idea of being a part of something that's bigger than who they are, and they lose themselves in that, so they never get to grow as an individual and form a point of view of their own.
Yeah, I would just say, I think the way in which we shift that perceived fear or actual fear or eliminate some of those risks, I think is twofold. There's a bottom-up strategy and a top-down strategy, right? So from the bottom up, there's this myth that gets perpetuated that you have these billion-dollar industries that are based on the labor of very few people. There's everything that surrounds sport does not exist if the athletes don't play. And so the only way in which that power is maintained is if athletes stay divided. And so by keeping athletes to protect what's yours, teaching them that's how you can people continue to be taken advantage of. And I think when athletes speak in one voice, and we've heard it from so many different people who are boycotting and organizing and mobilizing their teammates, when athletes speak in one voice, people have to listen, regardless of the size of the sport governing body or the sponsor, because without the athletes, there is nothing. We're not here. And then on the flip side, the top down is getting people to actually say the words of what they stand for and what they believe in. I think there's a lot of people who say, yeah, I'm an ally, yeah, I'm supportive, and then, what does that actually mean in their language and behavior? And you can find very few examples. And so it's actually just getting the owners to say, I would welcome an openly gay athlete on my team. I think that would be an asset to what we're trying to do here, right? If I was to look at most professional sports teams and ask who on that team is a champion of the LGBTQ community, you'd probably have to guess, right? And that's a choice. That apathy is a choice that I think people in positions of power have a responsibility to change.
I think the issue with the players, though, to piggyback on what you said from the bottom up, is I think the number one way people lose power is by thinking they don't have power. And I think a lot of athletes don't realize how powerful they are in the world and the impact that they could make on culture. So the number one way we lose power is or give up power is by thinking we don't have power. So now just re-educating the athletes to understand how powerful they actually are, and that will start to make change as well.
Well, and also it's important to keep in mind, if you're an athlete, when it comes to management, remember, you can do what they do. They can't do what you do.
That's true.
So we have another question here. Domestic violence seems endemic in men's sports. Are the NFL statements and acts against domestic violence and child abuse adequate? Martellus, you want to take that one?
I mean, domestic violence is an issue not with just men in sports, but men in the world, right? It's not just, there's 1,500 guys in the NFL, but there's so many other people in the world who's going through these same issues. It's just that when it happens on this level, it gets a bigger platform. But we have to stop the epidemic of domestic violence in their entire culture of being a man, right? It doesn't just start with the guys in the NFL. And then the NFL, the way that they handle different issues, like you take the Ray Rice incident, like if there's not a tape that doesn't, like he doesn't get banned from the league. You have the thing that's happening in Kansas City, which is ridiculous. You got a 2-3-year-old kid who getting his arm broke by what you're supposed to be your star athlete. You have guys playing these sports, but then you have a guy who goes and smoke weed. He gets suspended and banned from the NFL, but then someone's out here beating women and kids. They get a second chance and a third chance.
Oh, and don't kneel.
And
You won't have a job.
Yeah, don't take a knee, because like that's the worst thing you could possibly do ever to the NFL, right? Yeah. But the thing about taking a knee is, like, you talk about joining the conversation. It's a difference when it's a wide receiver or a quarterback a wide receiver or a running back taking a knee. When it's the quarterback, the face of the franchise, that's when they have a bigger issue with it, because now that is who they put up on the pedestal of the NFL. Every single team. If Peyton Manning joined the conversation in NFL would change. If Drew Brees came in and really joined the conversation, it would change. Tom Brady, like all these great white heroes that they have running around throwing the football, if they jump in and the conversation, it would be projected to it would be so much bigger. Yeah, so it's just like I was saying earlier, like a Chris Long will join the conversation, but he's a defensive end. No one really pays attention to the defense. I love Chris Long, and Chris Long is my boy. Shout out to Chris, you know what I'm saying? So,
but it's an anonymous kind of position.
But it's not the position that, right. Like, you know what I'm saying? So once the positions of, like, you know, the people who they look at NFL, if you look at NFL advertisement, it's all quarterbacks. Every single commercial is a quarterback doing something stupid. And I'm just keeping it real with y'all for a second. But if they join in the conversation, if they were to take a knee with Kaepernick, that conversation would totally change. If Tom Brady took a knee, worldwide America would be like, oh my God! What is this Tom Brady's talking about? They would start doing research. They would join in the conversation. They would be like, it will pique their interest. But since it's a black guy taking a knee, it's like, these guys, here he goes again. It's another one of these guys out here doing this. But to speak on, like, domestic violence, I think guys should be punished. If you hit a woman, you should not be playing football, right? And a lot of that goes with, and I don't feel like there's any excuse for child abuse. As a father, if anyone I don't whip my daughter, I just look at her like this, right? Because my hands are so big. My feet are big, my body's big, I'm ridiculously strong. I mean, I just could never, hitting a child to me at this position is just kind of ridiculous. I don't think that you should, discipline your child, discipline how you want, you know what I'm saying? But things get to the extreme. Hitting a woman, watching a video of, Ray Rice, I wanted to choke the shit out of Ray Rice. Right? I wanted to punch him in the face. They're so, when I see those guys, if they're on my team, I have issues with those guys. I'm attacking you every single day. Right? Hit me. I'm serious. This makes me angry.
I know you are serious.
This really makes it pisses me off. When I see these things going on, and then it'll be in the conversation. The other thing is Kaepernick has been in the news for forever, but these conversations, and especially through the NFL outlets, these conversations about domestic violence, and they come in the news cycle, and they get shit out on the back end, and no one really thinks about it. So these conversations need to be at the forefront. They need to be talking about this on all the platforms, ESPN. They need to have actual conversations about mental health and what it goes into being an athlete and what it takes to raise a man. Because the idea of what it takes to be what a man is, it gets changed when it comes to sport, but actually being a man has nothing to do with dominating another man on a sport. Sorry, guys.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah.
I'll just briefly add, it also would be helpful if before a player is in the league or that does commit an act of domestic violence, that our actual justice system did their job. Because part of the reason why these guys are available to play is because on that end, something doesn't happen.
But we all know the justice system sucks.
Okay, look, I'm not going to get you started. We'll be here all day. A round of applause for our panel.